Mike. Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to episode number 31 of At Your Service with Haber, and no Martinez today. Ed unfortunately can't make the show, but we are fortunate enough to have with us Rick Freedman, who is off to my right. I don't know which side he is on your screen. Rick is a local lawyer, a very close personal friend, and a mentor, and also, I'm proud to say, an associate. I asked Rick to come on for a variety of reasons, and it would have been nice to have Ed only because, well, I guess maybe there's other reasons, but primarily because Ed's perspective as a former prosecutor dovetails nicely against a guest like Rick, who is a former public defender. But let me tell you a little bit about Rick Freedman. I met Rick about 35 years ago when I was a law student at Nova, which we refer to here as Harvard of the South. My interest was in criminal defense, and Rick took an interest in my interest and allowed me to sit in on various things, kind of like as an informal law student internship. But more importantly, after I graduated law school, I was given an opportunity to take space in offices where Rick was, and Rick served as a mentor to me, really teaching me how to become an attorney. We had a law student on, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, and one of the things that we talked about during the course of that show was how, in terms of practical import, how little law school teaches you in terms of actually becoming a lawyer. And in other fields, like, for example, medicine, there are mandatory residencies where you cannot become a licensed medical doctor without serving some portion of time under the direct supervision of another individual or entity. Well, we don't have that here in the state of Florida in terms of a requirement. But Rick took it upon himself to offer that to me, and for that and other things, I'm forever and eternally grateful. Rick went to the University of Florida. He's what we call a very proud double Gator, getting both his undergraduate, graduate, and law school degrees from the University of Florida. And he is a lifelong fraternal member of the Tau Epsilon Phi fraternity. I believe, what is it, Tau Alpha? Is that what you guys were?
We are the Tau Alpha chapter, correct.
Tau Alpha chapter. Does that mean it's the first chapter?
No, Alpha is the first chapter, so there's several before us.
Okay.
We're the 25th chapter.
They made me remember all that Greek alphabet crap, and you'd think I'd know it already, living in Florida long enough with hurricane names. But still, I was a Phi Beta over at also a TEP at the University of South Florida. Anyhow, Rick has an awful lot to say, an awful lot to do. And again, one of the other reasons that I thought it was real interesting to have him on is, having started as a public defender, an assistant public defender here in Miami-Dade County, at that time under Bennett Brummer, and concurrently while Janet Reno was state attorney, which arguably was the best, I would say, state attorney and public defender combination probably anywhere in the history of the world. But that's where Rick started. And then he went into private practice, focusing on criminal defense, delving into personal injury. And now, all of these years later, he's developed a niche personal injury and wrongful death practice. So there's an awful lot to talk about with regards to how one transforms one's legal career, if that's your choice, and how one starts and gets to this end game. So now that I've talked everyone's ear off and not given Rick an opportunity to say anything, Rick, hey, how are you? Welcome.
Michael, it's a pleasure to be on today. It's a beautiful day in sunny South Florida. Spent the day outside yesterday at the Coconut Grove Arts Festival. Can't get better than that.
Didn't get mugged. Nice.
Yeah, and then today, it's beautiful. I'm looking out at my lake right now, and get to join the people on this show today and inform the public and teach them and educate them. And it's something that I really enjoy doing and have done my whole career.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. And I know the audience will definitely benefit from even just a few minutes with you. Certainly, I've benefited for almost 2 scores so far. Let's talk a little bit about your start. I know that you started in 1984. You got licensed, and you took your first job out of law school with Bennett Brummer at the Public Defender's Office here in Miami-Dade County. That's correct, right?
It is, but it dovetails into your mentoring subject, which is actually, I started on January 15th, 1983 as a certified legal intern certified by the Florida Supreme Court to be able to practice law as a third-year law student. So just like the medical students who do get that final year of doing internships and residency and learning under somebody who can teach them all the ropes, I was thrown into the Miami-Dade County Jail the first day that I arrived at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office. And within a week, I was in a courtroom defending people charged with felonies looking at up to 30 years in prison. I was working under 3 exceptionally fine attorneys in Bennett Brummer's office at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office that included Edith Georgie, Maxine Cohen-Landa, who went on to become a circuit court judge, and Gary Nunes. And over the course of a year, I was able to try 9 jury trials as a third-year law student, which is absolutely unheard of in pretty much any other state. And I got to do that because I was able to get certified by the Florida Supreme Court. So it was a tremendous mentoring opportunity for me to learn.
Now, just to clue the audience in a little bit, again, we had a law student on a couple of weeks, either it was last week or the week before, I don't remember, Oski Serbin. And that was one of the things we talked about with him, was getting the importance of taking an internship. He has an interest in criminal, but whether you're interested in criminal or not, doing an internship with either the state or the PD is an invaluable tool. It's a class you cannot get in law school. It's an education that you cannot get outside of anywhere, because there's no private law firm that's going to throw you in a courtroom. They may let you go sit and observe, but that's about it. Whereas, as you said, I did my CLI, my certified legal internship with the state attorney's office under Janet Reno at the time. I was 7 years behind you. But Janet was still working in that office, and I was privileged enough to be able to do the same thing. I got to try cases to a jury as a third-year law student, and it was very helpful and valuable. But still, I didn't take that next step, as you did, of going to work for that government entity after law school. Instead, as you know, because I was right there underneath your nose, I went right into your office and hung my shingle and started practicing. But talk to the audience a little bit about working for the PD, what it was like, what your chores were, how you advanced in the ranks, where you started, where you ended. I suspect that your CLI internship had you handling much more serious matters than your first day on the job as a paid employee.
No doubt about it. When I started as a full-time paid employee in '84, I started out doing traffic and misdemeanor, which means I was handling primarily DUIs and misdemeanor type cases where somebody's facing less than 1 year in jail. So I went from the top of the food chain as an intern, a third-year law student, to the bottom of the food chain when you start at the public defender's office. And it was the greatest foundation that you could learn from, because you started at the bottom and you worked yourself up, rung by rung up the ladder, first handling misdemeanors and traffic, and then working your way up, usually through juvenile court, and then getting to do felonies. And again, you start at the lowest level of felonies: third-degree felonies, second-degree felonies, first-degree felonies, and then if you graduate to the final level, you start doing life and then death cases, which means first-degree murder cases where somebody may be facing the death penalty. And that can occur as quickly in the state attorney or the public defender's office as usually 3 or 4 years out of law school. You can be handling it. So you get to learn from the best attorneys in the state of Florida, if not the country. It's literally a law firm of now about 200 attorneys, tremendous support staff, tremendous investigators, great mental health unit, good leadership, and you learn and you can tap into all these resources. And there's nothing better for a young attorney than being either at the state attorney's office or at the public defender's office.
I would add to that as a practicing attorney in the private defense bar, I hold the state attorney's office on a completely different spectrum than I do the public defenders. It's not that I don't respect or appreciate them, I do, but I have far greater respect and appreciation for the public defender's office. The state attorney arguably does plenty for the community in terms of the fact that their mandate is to serve the community, right? I mean, that's what they're there to do, to protect and to serve, kind of like the police motto, but more importantly, to mete out justice. As we've said many times on this show, and as I know, and you know, whether you'll admit or not, Justice is not always meted out by the state attorney's office because it just isn't, for a variety of reasons. That said, as a member of the private defense bar, Carlos Martinez, who is our current public defender, who served under Bennett Brummer, took over the office from Bennett, and has done a fabulous job as far as I'm concerned. You know, they say maybe he may not be a Bennett Brummer, but he's the next best thing. I have a great deal of admiration for Carlos and gratitude, because what he does for people like me in the private defense bar is he allows us to attend seminars with the public defenders on at least a monthly basis. It's consistent training in that office that they do, and they open the doors to the rest of us, because unlike the state attorney's office, who refuses to share anything with us, the public defender mentality and philosophy is that the entire defense bar should be all at the same high level of education, current events, status, knowledge. Anything that we can do to assist our clients helps everybody in the criminal defense bar. We can pick up the phone as private lawyers and call over to Carlos Martinez's office and ask questions. They'll field them.
Yeah.
State attorney will not do that. Just try getting one on the phone, even as a lawyer. But over at Carlos's office, they really go out of their way to help. And they get a bad rap from the public, because the public doesn't interact with the public defender's office unless they are arrested and indigent. And if you're arrested and indigent, then it doesn't matter how many lawyers they have. They could have 200, 250, 300. There's still not enough to cover the amount of indigent cases that we have in this county. And so unlike private defense attorneys who charge a significant fee in order to be able to offer up that personalized time, effort, attention, and service, and field those phone calls at 9 o'clock at night or on a Sunday afternoon or during a holiday, reply to the emails in real time, get out to the jail, do what we need to do, because that's what we're charging a fee for. The PDs get paid to do the same thing, but they can't manage their caseloads. So, as a CPD, you might have 300 cases sitting on your desk. And that means only 299, only one out of 299 is going to get the real attention that it needs. That's the case that may be going to trial that upcoming calendar, right? So, I have a great deal of respect and pride and confidence. And I thank Carlos very much. Obviously, your class, we could rattle off the names of people in your office that would be commonly known names, people who we would know in this community. Many of whom served as judges, many of whom are private defense lawyers, many of whom branched out into other areas of the law. So I think we kind of hit that a little bit, but let's talk some more about mentorship, because again, what you did with me was very informal. There was no formal relationship. There was no requirement. There was no necessity. It was just something that happened to work because of personality and circumstance and goodwill on your end, right? But there are some other things, and if I'm looking at the notes that you sent over to me earlier, we could talk about the Young Lawyers Division of the Florida Bar, the mentoring program guide, blah, blah, blah. So please, with that, go ahead.
So you're right when you say that the Public Defender's Office is a fantastic organization, and I always like to tell people who may be listening to this or anywhere, if you get assigned an assistant public defender in Miami-Dade County, you've got a tremendously educated, experienced, hardworking, fantastic attorney on your side. You won't do much better than that. Sure, you can pay thousands of dollars for a private attorney, but these attorneys at the PD's office bust their butt every single day representing you, and you would be happy to have them if you were in that same situation. The Florida Bar is a large organization. There's over 100,000 attorneys in the state of Florida licensed by the Florida Bar. Unfortunately, one of the things they could probably do a lot better with is mentoring. They've talked about it several times, trying to find some type of way to do something similar to what the doctors do, which is instead of a third year of law school or creating some stepping stone that required you, before you could get your license to practice, to be assigned into a mentorship, assigned to a law firm, assigned to some type of situation where you could learn the actual practice of law. We don't have that in the state of Florida. We do have a couple mentoring programs that I sent you. One is the Young Lawyers Division of the Florida Bar. It's a small program. There's only 300 attorneys that have signed up for that program. There's over 100,000 attorneys in the state of Florida, and 300 have volunteered to be mentors. So that doesn't speak much. Probably the best resource we have in South Florida, if you can't be a state attorney or you can't be a public defender, is COSAC's Minority Mentoring Foundation.
Just so you guys get the spelling, that's K as in Kappa, O Oscar, Z zebra, Y yellow, A apple, K kayak. COSAC, Kozyak. John
Kozak runs a law firm here in South Florida, tremendous law firm. And 15 years ago, he kicked off with these really small picnics and barbecues that we would show up to, mainly to socialize. But John had a bigger vision, and that was to get older attorneys to mentor law students. And in the last 15 years, over 2,000 law students have benefited from that mentoring program by being matched up with a lawyer and or judge during usually their third year of law school, learning the ropes of how it is to practice law in every aspect of it. That's what we need more of. There's no doubt about it, because a lawyer doesn't learn anything in law school when it comes to the real life of how to practice law. It's not even close. And it's important that we improve on our mentoring.
Well, for my part, I was, again, very blessed to have somebody like you to be able to teach me the ropes. I mean, I have memories of sitting in your office and just being marveled at how you conducted an interview with a client, your forms that you developed, the interview sheets, the follow-up questioning, the personalized analysis and consideration of police reports and information that you could look at independent of what the client told you, how to contemplate the client while at the same time knowing in your mind that they're advocating for themselves more often than not, whether it's conscientious or inadvertent, and being able to stay on track and target and keep them within the boundaries of reality, and then figuring out how to assess the case for purposes of what is it that I can do for you? What benefit do I bring to the table? And what is the value and cost for that in terms of time, effort, energy, and expense? Really, you taught me how to do that. And again, these are the types of things, there is no law school class for this. Law school teaches you a way of thinking, it teaches you a way of analysis, but it does not teach you how to be in the business of law. And it is a business. So, unless you work for a firm that has management and PR and billing and everything else, it's all on you. And particularly in the criminal defense realm, I don't know the actual statistics, but I have to assume that probably 85, 90%, maybe more, of criminal defense attorneys are sole practitioners.
No doubt about it.
Every now and then you get a couple of defense lawyers that get together and create a 2-person or a 3-person firm, but they're not, when you think of big firms, global firms like Greenberg, Traurig, and Ackerman and stuff, there is no such thing for criminal defense with that.
Absolutely. And the organization that I learned at the public defender's office, because I had to manage such a large caseload, made me develop the types of things that I ended up teaching you in terms of organizing my clients in a certain way, getting the information. I always felt like this was important to me. When I addressed my opponent, usually an assistant state attorney, or when I walked into court to address the judge, I wanted them to believe that I had known my client for the past 15 years. Not that I had met them 15 minutes ago or 15 days ago, but that I had known them for 15 years. So the information that I was acquiring was very important to me. That first hour or two that I spent with them and their family, them usually at a jail, unfortunately, and then their family, learning all this information, helped develop how I was going to represent them, where the case would go in terms of it. Sure, I had to look at the facts and I had to look at the law, but at the end of the day, I was representing a human being, and I needed to learn as much about that human being as I could, because that's what was going to be. At some point, there was a potential I was either going to trial or I was negotiating a plea and working out sentencing, and I needed to know that information. So that was critically important.
That's something that I did definitely learn from you. Humanizing the client is extremely important, because I can't speak to small podunk towns or other jurisdictions, But here at Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, we are huge venues in the criminal justice system. The numbers are staggering. And so any given defendant on any given criminal docket to a prosecutor and even to a judge are nothing more than a statistic. They are a number. You are F22, 1, 2, 3, 4, and nothing more.
That's it.
The only person on the planet that can humanize you is your lawyer, your defense lawyer. And so if your defense lawyer doesn't go into that courtroom oozing, reeking of your humanity, how else are you supposed to get that in front of a judge? How are you to get that a jury to think that or consider? You know, one of the things that I remember you teaching me in terms of a jury trial was, if you can get away with it, call your client by his first name. Never refer to him as Mr. or Mrs. Never, ever, ever call him the defendant or the accused. Always it's John, Jane. Sometimes a judge will cut you off and they won't allow you to do it, and that's fine. But
Right.
you at least open the door and do it once, and then let the judge make a big stink to the jury about how your client's not a human being. Put your arm around your client, sit next to your client, have another lawyer at the counsel table. If you can't do it, have the other lawyer constantly communicating with the client. It's humanization. It's part of the process that a jury looks at him, because the last thing you want is the jury to see F22, 1, 2, 3, 4. You want them to see Susie Smith.
No doubt about it. The practice of law, like you mentioned, also is a business. And for solo practitioners, it's tough. It's tough juggling those things, trying to maintain a caseload and learn about each one of your clients and give them the best advocacy as you can, while at the same time making sure the rent is paid and the phone bill is paid and your internet service is paid and your parking pass at the Metro Gerstein Justice Building is paid, and juggling all those things. So solo practitioners have it tough. The great thing about learning at the public defender's office and other big firms is you don't have to worry about those things. And you can just focus in and concentrate on your client and doing the best that you can for your client. I have always, when people ask me over my 38 years of practice, what was the best time of my life? It was the 5 years I spent at the public defender's office. There was no better time I had. I was making the least amount of money that I ever possibly had in my entire 38 years. And by far, it was the best time that I've ever had. I've never been able to equal that in terms of the camaraderie that I've had, the brotherhood and sisterhood that I had from the other attorneys working side by side with me, the quality of attorneys that were so close to me that I could tap into, and then just going to work every day, focusing on one thing, doing the best that you could for your client.
And you still have relationships with most of those people. I mean, they're still around practicing law.
Absolutely. You know, I made that huge transition that most attorneys are either afraid to do or just won't do. They're going to stick with the same type of practice for much of their career. And I transitioned little by little by little from the criminal defense field when I was 100% criminal defense to 38 years later. Now I'm 100% personal injury and wrongful death. Now that took a period of time until finally over the past 10 years, I've now been exclusively personal injury and wrongful death. But because of all those relationships I made during the first 25, 26, 27 years, those are my best business associates to give me work. And when we talked about the business of law versus practicing law and representing your client, well, the business of law is being able to get cases to come in the door. And getting cases to come in the door is the toughest thing that an attorney has to learn how to do. Eventually, they're going to learn through repetition and through experience how to be good lawyers, hopefully. But they never have to stop learning how to attract business to come in through the door. And everybody has their own ways of doing it. You're exceptional about tapping into all the different potential ways of doing it through the internet, through Facebook, and through Instagram, and through Twitter, and through YouTube, through this show that we're doing right now. I do none of that. That's not my forte. You're excellent at it. I get my cases two ways. I get them like you probably do through former clients. You've done such exceptionally good work for them that they're going to refer you to their friends, to their coworkers, to their family members. And then the way that I do the best at is I get a ton of work from those colleagues that you mentioned at the beginning of this. the ones who I've established and developed relationships over those years. Now that I do personal injury and wrongful death, those criminal defense attorneys pick up the phone, call me and say, hey, Rick, I need you to represent this person. They're a friend of mine. They're a former client of mine. They're somebody I know. I need a great personal injury and wrongful death attorney, and I want you to handle it. So that is huge important in terms of growing your business.
You've always been really good about maintaining lists and contact information for your clients, sending out, holiday greetings. And for a period of time, you did a newsletter. I don't know if you still do it or not. And this is all pre-internet. I mean, you were doing this in the 80s and 90s when it was unheard of. I mean, at least for me, it was so difficult to track things and to contact. I mean, you were doing hard mail letters to, dozens, hundreds of people on a regular basis. That was part of how you kept, your name flowing. And I specifically remember at least once where you really started focusing on PI at the time, and you started sending out notices to clients telling them, look, my office is now handling PI. And so, in a pre-internet era, you managed to do that very effectively.
Absolutely. Very important. When I started delving into the PI field, my first job out of the public defender's office was working for a gentleman by the name of Herbert Abramson. He had a 100% personal injury practice, and he hired me out of the PD's office to bring criminal defense to the firm and to teach me PI. So I got the best of both worlds. I got to do what I loved, which was criminal defense, and I got to learn a new field, which was personal injury. And little by little, I started doing more of that to the point where I was telling my clients, hey, I've got this niche field that I'm going to do, that I'm going to grow and grow and grow. I never expected it to get to the point that it did. I had no idea that I would transition completely and go to the opposite extreme. But knock on wood, I've done very well at it. I've been able to help a lot of people. At the end of the day, we as lawyers are in a helping profession. That's what we do. People come to us in times of need. People come to us at the worst time of their life, when unfortunately they or somebody they love have been accused of a crime, and many times not rightly so, or they've been involved in a catastrophic injury or death case where suddenly a spouse, a husband or a wife, or a child or a parent has been severely injured or killed, and they come to us at that worst time. So we are a helping profession. We need to help our clients, and that's important.
Let's talk a little bit about that transition from criminal to PI and now to wrongful death. And as you said, this has been it really took you about 25, 30 years to make that shift. You were at a point when you left Abramson's office, you went into a purely criminal practice where you were doing PI as kind of a side gig. And it wasn't what we call high-end PI, right? You had a lot of back then, rear end car crash cases, slip and fall. Again, you were an experienced litigator, but you were not a PI firm. So, as any newbie to a particular profession, you weren't starting with those really high-end cases. And maybe that was better for you in a way, because you got to cut your teeth, doing the what you were doing when you first started at the functional equivalent of what you did when you first started at the PD, right? Low-level misdemeanor traffic cases in the PI context.
Absolutely. Right? The soft tissue cases, the whiplash cases, you get rear-ended and that type of thing, where it's a smaller case in terms of value, just like the small misdemeanor cases. So I did get to cut my teeth on that and kind of built on that little by little by little. Yeah.
So in today's 2022 world, does this soft tissue business even still exist anymore?
It's still probably the largest part of anybody's practice, except for some small selective firms that only handle 7 and 8 figure cases, meaning $1 million, $10 million and up. They're doing these mass tort cases. They're doing the product liability cases. They're doing the catastrophic injury and wrongful death only. They're doing medical malpractice cases. Those cases are all going to generate usually million and up results, but they're doing a very small niche, practice in terms of that. But most attorneys that are handling personal injury cases, the bulk of their practice is still going to be soft tissue cases that may develop as the doctor sees them in terms of something more serious, depending on what the results are and what an MRI might say or an X-ray might say. And then that soft tissue case may end up developing into a pain management injection case, or it may develop into a surgery case of some kind. So it can get potentially bigger, but that's still the bulk of most personal injuries practice. Yeah.
So if somebody has a slip and fall on a crack in the sidewalk, or they get tapped at a red light by, somebody who's playing with their cell phone, or, God knows what kind of advice do you have for these folks? I mean, we're not talking about blood spurting or bones broken or hospitals, but just somebody who wants to take advantage of the opportunity.
Sure. But I can tell you from personal experience, from somebody who has been whacked in the rear by a car, it can be life-changing depending on how hard you've been hit, what kind of damage occurred to your car, but more importantly, what type of damage occurred internally to your body. So it starts out with immediately seeing a doctor and letting a professional assessing and seeing exactly what your injuries are. And that may be through an X-ray, but it's going to be through a hands-on experience of getting a full physical examination and finding out. And then usually it entails a course of physical therapy. And a lot of people are going to get well after 2 or 3 weeks of physical therapy. And that's great. But the ones who don't, the ones who have those nagging pains that turn into something where they feel it every day when they're getting up in the morning. They feel it every day when they're bending over to pick the laundry out of the dryer, or to put the dishes in the dishwasher, or to pick their kids up if they've got small kids or something like that. And they feel sharp stabbing pains in their back. Those cases are much more serious cases. And they're usually going to be lasting pains for the rest of your life. And that means you want to have a good, experienced attorney, making sure that you're getting the proper medical care that you get, and that, of course, that you get them the compensation that you can get them. Because that includes 5 main things. That's starting with fixing the car, the property damage, getting them rental reimbursement while they're getting their car fixed, getting their medical bills paid, getting their lost wages if you can, and then at the end of the day, getting them money to compensate them for their pain and suffering. That's the package deal, if you will. Those are the 5 things that any great personal injury attorney is going to be focusing on throughout the genesis of a good PI case.
Now, of course, you have the other angle of it too, right? Let's say that it stems from an automobile accident. I don't know, again, I can't quote accurate statistics, but I have to assume that somewhere between 25 and 50% of people on the road here in South Florida either have no license, no insurance, or both. And if you don't have uninsured motorists, if you have basic coverage, then what?
Yeah, some very important bullet points that I wrote down, of course. And that in South Florida begins and ends with what we call UM coverage, uninsured motorist coverage. At least half the people driving around Miami-Dade and Broward County either have absolutely no insurance at all, or they have the bare minimum. And the Florida legislature has decided that the bare minimum is that you don't have to have insurance to protect somebody else that you injure. You have to protect their motor vehicle, but you don't have to protect their physical body. It's amazing, we're the only state in the country out of 50 states where if I crash into you, Michael Haber, and I damage your car, I have to have insurance to cover the damages to your car that I damaged. But I don't have to have insurance to cover the injuries and the pain and suffering that I created to your body. So that means you need to have, in this South Florida area, it's an absolute must if you can afford it, speak to your insurance agent and ask them, how much extra is it going to cost me to get uninsured motorist coverage for your vehicles? Because that is the most critical, important thing that you can have to help yourself and to help your personal injury attorney to try and get money for you at the end of the case. That's an absolute, very important issue.
And if we jump a little fast forward to the wrongful death field, which I don't really want to get into just yet, but because we're on this topic, God forbid it's not a soft tissue issue. God forbid it's not a, herniated disc. And let's say somebody actually dies, but there was no coverage on the other side. Nothing. People didn't have any insurance, or they were underinsured. You're done. I mean, not only you got a death to deal with, but you got no recovery.
I handled 7 wrongful death cases in 2021 where I had to tell the family members, I'm sorry, but I cannot get you a single penny. I was on the phone Saturday, 2 days ago, with a father in Venezuela. His 18-year-old son got run over. He was on a moped, and the car ran him over. 2019 Camaro ran over the moped and killed the 18-year-old boy. The 2019 Camaro that killed him had no insurance on the car. So I had to tell this father and mother in Venezuela that I can't get you any money whatsoever for the death of your 18-year-old son. It's a real problem in South Florida. Now, one thing that we can do, and again, another bullet point, and I will tell anybody in the public that's listening, the one thing that you always see on all the network TV stations when somebody's died in South Florida after a horrible crash is we're setting up a GoFundMe page and we're collecting money for the funeral benefits. Let me tell you, the public, if you have insurance coverage, you automatically get $5,000 from your own insurance company to pay for funeral and death benefits, for a funeral and a burial. You don't know it. There's no reason why you would know that, but you're required by law as part of your insurance policy to have something called PIP, Personal Injury Protection. And that PIP coverage covers you for many different things: medical bills, lost wages, but importantly for wrongful death cases, it gives you a $5,000 check that your attorney can do the paperwork, request, and the attorney will not charge you a penny to get it for you, to get that $5,000 to help your family through the most difficult time by covering usually a large chunk, if not all, of a funeral and a burial or a cremation or whatever it is you're going to decide to do.
Personally, I'd like to be turned into a diamond. Think they'll cover that?
Oh, I don't think they'll cover that.
No. Mike Rowe, do you follow him?
Occasionally, yes.
I just read an article not too long ago, a thing that he put out where he talked about how one of the new things they're doing with dead bodies, families are turning the ashes into a very fine powder, which they then put into a meter. I forget what the word is for it, but like a sand timer,
right,
where you flip it upside down and it goes down, and then you forget the word for it. Anyhow, just a thought. I don't suppose they'll cover that either.
Yeah.
Sorry, but it's a good idea. That way you could be brought out for like game night and stuff like that. Actually, family gets to have you participate. That was the spirit of Mike Rowe's post. So while we're on wrongful death, I mean, we may as well go there for a moment. So you've transitioned into doing an awful lot of wrongful death cases, and wrongful death is like PI on steroids, right? That's where through somebody else's negligence or recklessness or what have you, even criminal act, there is a fatality, and there is a path to try and seek financial compensation for that, kind of like somebody would seek financial compensation for an automobile accident or a slip and fall. Only this involves a death, and that ratchets up the stakes, correct?
Yeah, I start with saying the pedestrian who gets killed, the motorcyclist gets killed, the bicyclist gets killed, somebody driving a car, somebody driving a truck, trains are involved. And then, of course, you take it off the roadway, and we've handled people falling off buildings and at construction sites, and somebody getting crushed in an elevator shaft, and you name it, electrocution, cutting trees from a high wire, involving Florida Power and Light. And so it goes through the entire spectrum. 90% of the cases are highway and roads related. The other 10% are a myriad of other different ways that somebody may have passed away.
And how many of those do you handle in a given year, approximately?
I'm averaging anywhere from 7 to 10 a year. So in the past decade, I've handled well over 100 wrongful death cases.
And so, I just want to give a little bit of context to the audience. Every case, I don't care what kind of case we're talking about. I don't care what genre, area of law. I don't care what the stakes are. To the individual involved in that case, it is as serious as it can be. I always say, as a criminal lawyer, I don't care if you have a misdemeanor or a murder. It's irrelevant to me, because that case may as well be a murder charge to you. Your liberty, your reputation, your freedom, not only in terms of physical freedom, but in terms of your freedoms. I mean, any type of a conviction for any type of a crime may affect your Second Amendment rights. It may affect your ability to travel, to rent, to buy property, to get a loan. There's just a million collateral consequences for any given criminal case. And the same applies to every aspect of law. It doesn't really matter if we're talking about a divorce case, if we're talking about a contracts case. To that particular individual in the litigation, the stakes are extremely high. With that said, some cases require an awful lot more time and attention than others. So, for instance, if I get a petty theft or a shoplifting case, it's definitely not going to take as much time as a capital litigation case. It's definitely not going to take as much time as a person who I need to do a mitigation package for to avoid minimum mandatory sentencing or to seek a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines. Obviously, those cases are going to take more. And so in my mind, and I leave it to you to correct my potentially incorrect thought process, but in my mind, the way I look at the wrongful death cases is they're more akin to those capital homicide cases or those very serious downward departure cases where we have to prepare a very, very comprehensive packet of materials, taking a multidisciplinary approach to the person's life, to their history, to their family, to their childhood, to their psychological or emotional well-being, to their physical needs, to the needs of their family, to who do they support, what do they do, what have they done. By the time you get done with one of these mitigation packages, you will have spent weeks or months preparing a monster presentation and figuring out the evidentiary, angles and everything else with it. So again, not putting words in your mouth, but I kind of, from my uninformed outside vantage, I see wrongful death cases as being more akin to that than a traditional PI case. Am I right? Am I wrong? Or do you have to put in the same type of energy for your basic rear end collision case when you're pitching the insurance company as you would for a wrongful death claim?
Yeah, no, for a wrongful death claim, if there is insurance coverage. Now, this case where I mentioned the father of Venezuela, unfortunately, although I probably already put in 50 or 60 or 70 hours in that case, and I'm not going to collect a penny on the case, we are not going to spend any more time on that because there's just, at the end of the day, no way to really collect money on that type of case. But on the ones we've identified that who we believe to be the responsible party, the liable party, we're going to spend a lot of time and we're going to spend a lot of money on the case up front. We're going to invest our resources.
Hang on a second, Rick. Let me cut you off for a second because I want to make sure the audience understands. When Rick says we, he doesn't mean him and the client. He means he's going to go out of pocket. He's not going to say to let's assume the Venezuelan father had an insurance, and had a defendant with deep pockets. It wouldn't be the Venezuelan father writing you a check for the money that you're going to expend. You're putting this out of your own pocket. You're basically going to the courtroom casino and wagering that the money that you put down as an ante is going to pay off in the long term. Correct?
Absolutely. We may spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on a small to mid-sized case. We could spend $100,000 or more on a potentially large case. It's going to start with hiring an investigator, like you might do on a good-sized case, and expert witnesses. Usually with me, that means I'm going to be hiring an accident reconstruction expert, somebody who can go out to the scene, look at what happened, read the traffic homicide investigative report, and then start developing a theory of how we believe a crash may have occurred and how we can place fault, liability on the other side. Because at the end of the day, there's two important components. Once we've identified there is insurance, there's still two important components to any wrongful death case, and that is proving that it was the other side's fault, meaning negligence or liability, and that's going to be 100% of the focus, is putting all our resources in how can we best put together a package to prove that, and then on the second front, putting together as many resources as we can to explain how what happened has damaged the survivors, which means a spouse, children, or parents. In the state of Florida, that's as far as it goes in terms of the survivorship law in the state of Florida. It's either going to be a spouse, parents, and our children, depending on the individual situation. So we're going to be putting in a lot of time, my law firm, and we're going to be putting in a lot of money, and we're going to do it with the hope that we can get a great result for our client at the end of the day. And unfortunately, a great result can never bring the person back who died. The father who got killed down in South Dade County, who was working down in the fields and sending money back to his 4 children in Guatemala every single month. These 4 children in Guatemala had one source of being able to get food put on their table, and it wasn't their mother who was living with them in Guatemala. It was their dad who had immigrated to this country and who had worked down in the nursery fields down in South Dade County, and every single month was sending money back to his wife for the 4 children in Guatemala. So the only way that we can try and replace that is to try and get a good result for our client and get some of that money back to Guatemala to help those 4 children.
Wow. Crazy, crazy stuff. You've had a lot of very interesting wrongful death cases. Maybe you can share one that you consider to be particularly interesting.
Well, I would say that the one that comes to mind that was one of the toughest was an autistic child of 10 years old who unfortunately drowned in a lake right next to Joe Robbie Stadium. Well, what's now Hard Rock Stadium. I still like to call it JRS.
It'll always be Joe Robbie.
But back in 2003, a child got out of the house on Christmas Eve. I mean, you can't make that stuff up or write a script about it. With the Christmas presents under the tree. The child got out of the house on Christmas Eve and got down to a body of water on the property that was supposed to be completely enclosed pursuant to a contract that the developer had signed with the county, and they didn't have that body of water completely enclosed. The child got into the body of water and drowned. And we spent the next 4.5 years and several hundreds of thousands of dollars of our money. Now, the law firm that I worked with and my closest friend at the time, Adam Donner, and I prepared the case for trial. We settled against 4 of the defendants who we felt like were responsible, subcontractors on the scene, because the property was still partially a construction site. So we still were able to get money from a fencing subcontractor and from one of the subcontractors that was help in charge of the site, the general contractor. We were able to settle the cases against them for about $1.2 million. And then finally, we tried the case against the developer of the property. We tried it in front of Judge David Miller here in Miami-Dade Circuit Court in the Civil Division. It got tried over 12 days to a jury trial of 6 people from the community. And at the end of the trial, the jury awarded the surviving mother a $5 million verdict. And it was a tremendous verdict to send a very clear message to this particular developer and to all developers that they needed to follow the rules. That if they were going to sign a contract with the county and make promises to the county, that they had to follow the rules. And the only way that we could make sure that people like this follow the rules and we make sure that the rules are enforced is to hold them accountable. And in this particular case, a jury of 6 living in this community decided to hold this developer accountable, and the insurance company had to pay in that situation. So a total of $6.2 million was available in this case to the survivors. There was no father survivor, so there was just a mother survivor here, and that's who the beneficiary of that was.
So coming out of that, though, and get to the business angle for a minute, there is obviously legal fees. And I understand this is not my area, so I'm not an expert. You are. But I understand that there are regulations by the Florida Bar as to what you are permitted to take in terms of maximums. You could certainly take less if you want by contract, but you're not permitted to exceed certain numbers, which I'll ask you to elaborate on a little bit. And then also the other issue is, as you said in that case, you and the Donner firm put several $100,000 into the case. So obviously you would be entitled to the return of those upon a successful payout pursuant to a settlement and or judgment. So maybe you can run with that for a moment.
Absolutely. And remember, when we take a case, we sign what's called a contingency fee contract, meaning it's contingent on our success. So if we had lost that case, we would have put 4.5 years of our lives and our staff lives into that case, which is thousands and thousands of work hours. The several $100,000 that we spent, our law firm spent, putting that case together. If we had lost that case, we would have lost that. The client would have lost nothing in terms of the time that we put in and the money that we put in.
Or dollars, right? So there, that's again, it's, and just so the folks know, contingent fees are not permitted in criminal cases. Criminal lawyers are not allowed to charge a fee based on a result. We are allowed to charge flat fees. We are allowed to charge by the hour, but we are not allowed to make it contingent upon a result. And that is precisely what personal injury and wrongful death is. It is almost entirely contingent.
The best attorney that the public can ever have, if you hire an attorney that charges you by the hour, regardless of the result, you're paying. Okay. If you hire an attorney that charges you a flat rate, regardless of the result, you've paid your money. The only way that we get paid is if we get a result for our client. So you know you have the hardest working lawyer that you possibly could have for you, because at the end of the day, the only way I'm getting paid is if I get that result. And in the state of Florida, that means if I settle the case without having to go to trial, then I'm going to get 33 1/3% in most cases.
And again, you can agree to take less if you choose, but you can't bump that up to 40 or 50 or whatever you want.
Right. And if I file a lawsuit and litigate the case, then in most cases, I'm going to get 40%. There are some statutes that require certain different things. Like if you sue a governmental entity, you can only get 25% instead of 40%. And the Florida Bar and the Florida Supreme Court has permitted, in very limited circumstances, when the case is so unique and so challenging, and you're going to have to spend so much extra time and so much extra money under certain circumstances, if you petition a circuit court judge and can meet that burden, a judge will be willing to pay you more than that normal contractual amount that I've just stated, as long as you have an agreeing client and an agreeing circuit court judge. But that's in a small, minuscule amount of cases.
We've only got a couple more minutes left, and there's two topics I want to hit, and they're going to take a little bit of time. So let me get right into them.
Yeah.
One of them I want to talk about is the juxtaposition that you have as a wrongful death and PI lawyer, but particularly, I'm sure, in your wrongful death cases, you have to wind up doing almost the exact opposite of what you did for also many years as a criminal defense lawyer, which is serving as a victim's rights advocate and basically a de facto, would-be self-appointed prosecutor. You need to make sure that if it is possible for a crime to be prosecuted, that it is prosecuted, correct?
I'm a pit bull, and I like to tell my clients and other criminal defense attorneys, I'm your worst nightmare, because I know what criminal defense attorneys are doing to try and win their case. And when I'm representing a family whose loved one has been killed by a drunk driver, which is a DUI manslaughter case, I know how easy it is for that to get lost in the criminal justice system, and how my family of victims who have lost their loved one to a drunk driver could not get the justice that they so rightly deserve. So I am going to be on that state attorney's butt from the minute they get to the case. In fact, I'm on that case from day one with the traffic homicide investigator. In this Venezuelan case where they're investigating it criminally, I'm on the phone or emailing the traffic homicide investigator 2 to 3 times a week because I want to make sure that the case does not get lost in the cracks. And I'm following that case through. I just worked on a case for 4 years with a family in Cuba. We collected a grand total of 0 on the case. 0, because there was no insurance. A boyfriend was driving a car, crashed into the center median up in Palm Beach County, and killed his girlfriend. And he was arrested for drunk driving, for killing his girlfriend. And the mom and dad of that girl were devastated. And they wanted to make sure that being in Cuba, that the case did not get lost in the criminal justice system. I worked on that case pro bono for 4 years until that case went to trial just about 3 weeks ago up in Palm Beach County. And they tried the kid for DUI manslaughter. It ended up being a hung jury. And then they were going to try the case again, but they worked out a plea 2 weeks ago, and the kid just surrendered to the Florida State prison system. I did not stop working on that case and making sure the state attorney knew I was there because I wanted to make sure that the victim's family got justice. So I'm doing exactly the opposite of what I did for the first 25 years of my career by representing victims tied into my personal injury and wrongful death cases with the state attorney's office.
And that dovetails very nicely into the last topic I want to talk about, which is community service. I have never known anybody who has been more committed, consistent, and spectrum across the board than you in regards to what you give to the community. Whether it's the Biscayne Bay Kiwanis Club that you have been working with for 30 plus years, or if it's the court-appointed counsel committee of the 11th Judicial Circuit, or any of the number of things that you do. For instance, you don't practice criminal defense anymore, but you're very active with the criminal defense bar. You serve as a board member on FACDL Miami. You still serve on the courts committee with the 11th Judicial Circuit. You are a friend to every lawyer that posts questions on our FACDL Google group, seeking advice, counsel, case law, input, thoughts, ideas. This permeates, even being a soccer coach, for all these many years, youth soccer coach, I should say. But part of what you have done in terms of your giving has given back to you. So I want to just, if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts on community service, and I want to share one anecdote with the folks afterwards. But go ahead and talk
Sure.
about it.
Yeah, when I joined Kiwanis 30 years ago, I didn't do it to get legal business. When I joined FACDL Miami, as a criminal defense lawyer, the Florida Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, I didn't join it to eventually get business as a personal injury attorney. When I became co-chair of the screening committee for private court appointed counsel, again, didn't do it to get business, or as a soccer coach, and my fraternity work that I do. But a byproduct of me putting on all this time, effort, and energy and giving back to the community in these different ways is people that I meet know that I'm now a personal injury and wrongful death attorney. So my phone does not stop ringing with people that are referring me cases from these different places that I am involved in. So the best thing that any young attorney can do is to get involved in the community, not only on bar committees, but get involved in the community in different ways. Join a community service organization like the Lions Club, or in my case, the Kiwanis Club. Join FACDL Miami and get involved in the board of directors, or get involved in the subcommittee, or do other things. Like I am a youth soccer coach and love doing that. So I'm working with different families and their kids all the time. So it's provided me with a tremendous resource of business.
I want to just throw in one quick story anecdote as a side thing. I spent a good deal of time with you at the Biscayne Bay Kiwanis Club, and we did every year there was a silent, not sometimes not so silent, but every year there was a banquet, let's just say, and there was an auction at the banquet, and the idea was to raise funds to be able to do the things that the organization does, including its scholarship program, which I'd like you to spend a second telling the folks about the scholarship program for what Biscayne Bay Kiwanis does with that. But apropos of that, you were involved one year in a charity golf event, and you got paired up with none other than Rush Limbaugh. you had never met Rush prior to that. Obviously, you know who he was, because unless you live under a rock, you couldn't have known who he was, especially here. And while you guys maybe were not of the same political idea, it was still an interesting experience for you to be able to play 18 holes with this man and shoot the shit as well as shooting the ball, right? But as a byproduct of that, please tell the folks what happened, because it's a fabulous story.
Yeah, I mean, we showed up at Bonaventure Country Club, and each foursome got assigned one sports athlete. That's who you were supposed to get, either Dan Marino or Nat Moore or Mark Clayton or Mark Duper, or somebody else, within the Dolphins organization, and or some other athletes. And we pull up to the first tee, and we get not an athlete, but we get Rush Limbaugh. And for 4.5, almost 5 hours, we got to spend that time on the golf course shooting the shit, as you said, and shooting the golf ball down the fairway while he was smoking cigars and drinking his scotch. And I was the only one who decided, you know what? I'm going to use this opportunity to tell Rush about the Biscayne Bay Kiwanis Club and about my vision of this scholarship program that I had just started, but I needed seed money for to try and help me develop so I could buy 4-year fully paid college scholarships from the prepaid fund and award them to seniors graduating from Booker T. Washington High School in Overtown. And by the end of that 5-hour golf time that we did, he gave
Hang on, wait. Before you get to the punchline, because you left something out.
Yeah.
You also were just thinking, maybe I could get him to give me a couple 8x10 signed color photographs, right?
I asked him for 3 things. I asked him for 8x10 signed photos. I asked him,
and the intent with those was to use them at the silent auction, right?
Sell them at the silent auction and get something for them. He had shirts, EIB, the Excellence in Broadcasting Network. So he was going to agree to give me golf shirts. And then I put in writing, I said, let's do a live shot at the studio where one person can bid on the ability to show up at the studio. So he said to me, Rick, he says, I'll give you the photographs. I'll give you the golf shirts, but I can't have anybody come to my bunker. That's what he called it. I can't have anybody come to my bunker because I value my security and my safety highly. But instead of giving you this live shot at the bunker, how about I write you a check for $100,000? And I mean, the entire auction, okay, for the last 10 years, we were averaging $40,000 a year collecting from the entire auction. Suddenly one person was writing me a check for $100,000. And I was able to get the seed money to start buying these scholarships that we've now awarded 13 different students at Booker T. Washington 4-year fully paid college scholarships. Well, that $100,000, when I emailed him next year to tell him about the great work we had did and let him know that we were awarding this scholarship to a student, well, what did Rush do? He went and wrote me another check for $100,000. And then in the year 3, when I told him about how we did in year 2, he wrote me another check for $100,000. And this went on for a period of most of the decade. And that's how I got the money that we are still using to purchase scholarships to award to seniors at the Booker T. Washington High School.
So the takeaway from that, among other things, folks, is don't judge a book by its cover. You never know unless you put in the time, you invest the effort, and you ask the questions. Because, the better part of $1 million was donated by a guy who many people wouldn't have even given the time of day to. And the only reason it happened is because Rick had that temerity and that peace of mind and that generous thought process to ask, and he received. But that's who Rick is. So, folks, we're a little bit over. I want to apologize for that, but I want to thank Rick for coming on. I hope that you all have enjoyed this discussion. I think it's been, really enlightening on many different levels and fabulous. If you ever have, God forbid, a problem in the personal injury or in the wrongful death arena, should you know somebody who is injured or wrongfully loses their life, or if you even suspect that it might have happened wrongfully, but you're not sure, Rick's information is scrolling on the bottom of the screen. Please call him, email him, send a homing pigeon. You're not going to find a better, more caring, more skilled, and more tenacious lawyer than Rick Freedman. Rick, thank you so much again for everything. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. And I'm sorry that Ed wasn't here to be able to give the state's perspective. But on the other hand, I think that we spent a real good, productive hour plus.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for letting me join the show today. And anybody out there, I'm here for you. You've got the information. Please don't hesitate to email me or call me at any time.
Take care, folks. Thank you for watching episode 31 of At Your Service with Haber and without Martinez this week. Hopefully, Martinez will be back next week for episode 32. And in the meantime, we look forward to being at your service. Thank you all and take care.